What's up, everybody? Welcome to the 3 and Out YouTube page. I'm John Middlekauff, and we are talking football all day, every day. Make sure you subscribe, like the video, share it with your friends. Let's roll, baby. What is going on, everybody? Happy summer. It's June. It is hot. Great time of year. And probably not a better time of year and no one had a better Monday than Justin Jefferson, who got a historic amount of money, got $110 million guaranteed, and obviously benefits from playing in the NFL in 2024. So we'll dive into that. We will dive into the impact on the Vikings and just the overall impact on the market. Lamar Jackson skipping OTAs, giving up $750,000. Larry Allen, one of the greatest offensive linemen, passed away today. Brandon McManus was cut, and Ben Johnson gave some interesting comments, so we'll dive into all that, and gotta chime in on this Caitlin Clarke situation. She's getting bodied left and right, knocked to the ground constantly. So we will do a little tangent Tuesday on that. But before we dive into some football, I've been saying for a while I was going to go to a concert on Saturday night. Had a few margaritas at the house, swimming in the pool. Got a little Uber ride there, had a few more pops there, and saw Luke Combs, and it was very, very fun. First time I've ever been to State Farm, where the Cardinals play. Okay, nothing great, kind of in BFE, but really enjoyed myself, and I've gone to multiple concerts, multiple games. I was watching some highlights of the Yankees, Judge hitting homer after homer, Soto hitting homers, Stanton hitting homers. And I was like, God, it looked like a Yankee home game. Well, if you're a fan, and you want to go see your team and you don't live in the city, that's why you got it. My friends at Gametime, the official ticketing app of this podcast. I have been using them consistently now for a while. Cannot recommend them enough. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code JOHN for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem the code JOHN for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. Before I hopped on here, I just typed into Google Randy Moss career earnings. I would have guessed $70 million, and the number turned out to be a little higher. It was a little over 80. And I think most people agree that he is the second best wide receiver of all time. I didn't pull up Jerry Rice's because whatever his number was wouldn't even be applicable to today. But Randy Moss, who thrived not that long ago, had a historic season in 2007. That's not 1996. And his prime was in the 2000s, made a career $82.5 million. Justin Jefferson, who is 24 years old and who looks like a ascending, potentially transcendent player for his generation, just got $110 million guaranteed. And I'm a huge believer of this. Like, we throw around the word hard work a lot. I struggle with that. Like, my job is time consuming, but like, I've worked construction. My dad was a farmer. Like, I've been thrown on the ranch. Like, that's hard work. Some work is just time consuming. Obviously, the world has changed with the internet, but timing changed my life. Being born in the 80s and coming into my own in my 30s when podcasting existed, when social media and Twitter enabled me to meet Colin Cowherd through DMs. You would not be listening to me if this was 2002, because you wouldn't have the opportunity to. Even if I had been born in the late 60s, early 70s, you would never know who I was. This platform wasn't even a thought in some engineer's mind. And I say this all the time. The highest earners I know are mostly women and chicks that I went to college with. Because when I graduated in 2008, when I first showed up at Cal Poly, I rushed a fraternity. And obviously, you're bullshitting with the older guys. And a lot of guys would be like, well, you only move to Northern California and San Francisco if you're going to work in finance, either banking, venture capital, accounting, something like that, or there aren't really jobs there. Yet in 2008, when I graduated, that's when all these tech companies Facebook, Oracle was becoming huge, and everything under that umbrella were about to take off like a rocket ship. And they were going to hire a lot of people for sales. And if you got in at the right time and you were good at your job, you were about to print money for the next 15 years. And that's what a lot of people I knew in college when I was making 20 grand working for the Eagles were crushing it, living high on the hog, and have been for a while now. But they benefited because it wasn't 1996 or 1983. They graduated college and entered the workforce, which all you read at the time, it was the worst time ever to be a college graduate. Not if you were moving to San Francisco and about to get involved with all these companies that weren't that old and were about to take off to the moon. And a lot of players in the history of the league, I've never been a big believer in when people get on TV. It's usually younger, newer people and like try to talk down about people in the 70s or the 60s. Like I met Jerry West. He's enormous. I'll promise you this. If Jerry West had played in 2024, he'd be elite just like he was back in the 60s or 70s. I met Mean Joe Green. He's one of the biggest human beings I've ever seen. His hands are like bear paws. If you put Mean Joe Green in 2024 at 25 years old, he'd be a dominant player. But those guys, if you had been born then and were a great player, you didn't make that much money. And for a long period of time, a lot of guys worked second jobs. Then it started to explode as the expansion of television. But when Randy Moss, who TV was full on going, pedal to the metal, made $82 million, which is, don't get me wrong, is a lot of money. I mean, I like many of you, would gladly make $82 million over the course of our 20s and 30s. But relative to what guys are making now, it's not even close. Justin Jefferson just signed for $110 million. Deion Sanders' career earnings were $42 million. If you put Deion Sanders in his prime right now in the NFL, he'd be the best corner by a country mile. No one would even be close. He would easily make $30 million a year. He could cover everybody. But he played in the late 80s, 90s. You just didn't make as much money. And I've always understood when older players sometimes get bitter over the money, even though it's out of all of our control. We don't determine when we're born, when we enter a workforce, when we enter an industry that's either, the arrow's pointing up or the arrow's pointing down. But there has never, ever been a better time to play in the NFL when it comes to your financial ability. I'm talking about average players. We see what, above average starters get in free agency. We had guards making 17, 18, 19 million dollars a year. If you are an elite player right now at wide receiver, as a pass rusher, as an offensive tackle, quarterbacks have always made a lot. You are going to break the bank. For a long period of time in my sports fandom, it was like, well, football is probably the coolest, but in basketball you make more, and baseball you definitely make more, and it's all guaranteed. Well, now some of these numbers, like, we're only kind of at the beginning. Because guess what? The popularity of football seems to be expanding. And this television contract, last year, the salary cap was $255 million. Well, it's growing on average by about 10%. So if you just do the math over the next couple of years, it could be at $300 million by 2026. It could be at 400 plus million by the end of the decade. And guess what happens at the end of the decade? A new television contract. Well, we just saw the NBA more than double their contract, and their ratings are down. So what do you think is going to happen here? I've said forever. I've lived through the 90s when baseball was really popular, and it's nowhere near the same. I am not arrogant enough because I do this for a living, or naive enough just because I love the sport to think football will be on top forever. That's not the way the world operates. I don't care whether you're a country, whether you're a business, whether you're football. Things ebb and flow. But for the foreseeable future, the money flowing into the NFL is only going to grow and grow and grow. And no one has benefited more than high-end guys. Quarterbacks are now making $50 million. Pass rushers are making over 30. And now wide receivers are flying by that 30 number and getting guaranteed dollars over $100 million. It wasn't that long ago. When I was a kid, running backs used to be the first guy off the draft board. Google the history of the league, how many times a running back went in the top 2 or 3 picks. Happened all the time. And now that's shifted to a different position at wide receiver. And Justin Jefferson, you could make the argument he's the best wide receiver in the league. But, and I saw a video today, he was super happy. He should be. It's got to be an incredible feeling. But he would have been probably this sweet in 1987 or 1973 or 2004. He never had the opportunity to make this type of money. And all these players in the league, coaches as well, benefit from this financial windfall. And it just, I promise you this, because I was thinking about it this morning, it's only going to get bigger and bigger, at least for the foreseeable future. It is not going to slow down. And the next time we see, a Trent Williams, Jonathan Ogden level talent at offensive tackle, that number is going to be historic. We've already seen it with the defensive linemen. Who won today? I'll tell you the winner today. Micah Parsons. Because I follow this stuff, obviously, for a living. My guesstimate, just in my head, I was like, I bet Justin Jefferson, once you see some of these other numbers, 70-ish guaranteed, 75 guaranteed. I was like, I'll probably get 95 guaranteed. You got 110. I would have guessed Micah Parsons, he'd get a little more than Nick Bosa. No, he'd probably get $15 million more than Nick Bosa. And when his contract comes out, he'll get $140 million guaranteed and $37 million on average a year. And you know where I stand on the average per year. I think it's a little overrated because of the way the sport is, the injury risk. Things change so rapidly. The guy that you think is going to have a 15-year career ends up only playing at a high level for 7 or 8. But the money, if you are a Pro Bowl high-end guy at these premium positions, the quarterback, got crazy several years ago. Now these other positions are right behind him. And it's a good time to be an NFL player. And it's a good time to be if you're a Minnesota Viking fan. Because essentially what they did is they shorted Kirk Cousins. They said, we don't want to be in this business anymore. And the money that they would have given him, because that's give or take what he got, guaranteed-wise, with the Atlanta Falcons, they got rid of him. And they inserted a rookie quarterback. And when you insert a rookie quarterback, for the next 4 years, it gives you an insane amount of flexibility. And it makes you feel pretty good about giving a contract to a guy that you know is an elite player because you have more room to do that with other players. Because your quarterback, relative, if he hits, and listen, if he hits as a quarterback, people think, Mahomes, Josh Allen, Lamar. If he just can be Derek Carr 5 years ago, or Kirk Cousins 5 years ago, or Jimmy Garoppolo early on in San Francisco career, you're in pretty good shape. You can compete with those guys if you build your team well around them. And obviously, Justin Jefferson, you got Jordan Addison, who's really good. They got a young stud offensive lineman. Hockenson tore his ACL, but if he comes back, you have a head coach who's also a play caller that many believe's really, really good. Minnesota Vikings fan, this year, you might be the 4th best team in your division, partly because your division's loaded. Lions, probably a top 3 or 4 team in the league. The Packers, if their quarterback just sustains a level of play, are going to win double-digit games. And the Bears probably just upgraded greatly at quarterback and added some talent this offseason. So it's going to be difficult. But big picture, in 3 years, if J.J. McCarthy just becomes a solid starter, you're going to be a very, very competitive team with a lot of cap flexibility. We are this close to crowning an NBA champ. And with action heating up on the court, it's even hotter at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. There are only so many games left, and DraftKings Sportsbook has you covered with same-game parlays, live betting, odds boost, and so much more. Don't miss out, or you'll have to wait until the next NBA season to place your bets. It's super easy for first-timers to get started. Try betting on something simple, like picking a team to win. Go to DraftKings Sportsbook app, select your squad, and place your first bet. It's that simple. New to DraftKings? Listen up. New customers can get a no-sweat bet up to $1,500. Just deposit at least $5, and you'll get a bonus bet back equal to your first bet if it doesn't hit. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now and use the code JOHN. That's code JOHN for new customers to get a no-sweat bet up to $1,500 if your first bet doesn't hit. Only on DraftKings. The crown is yours. Lamar Jackson. The big headline is that he forfeited $750,000 by not showing up at OTAs. And I did the math. If you make $100,000, it'd be the equivalent of giving up $1,500. If Lamar Jackson, I just basically said he made $50 million. So it'd be the same thing as giving up $1,500. Now, it's not the same because your purchasing power with $100,000 and after taxes and everything is obviously a lot different than $50 million. So if you give up $750,000, he can still get a loan without even blinking an eye for a $15 million house. He basically can do whatever he wants because the amount of money he has flowing in from his contract. So it's not the same, but on a relative basis, that's what it would be. If you made $200,000, it'd be $3,000. So big picture, it's not that crazy if you're him. It is not necessarily a number that is going to impact his life. Though, I think we would all agree if we represented Lamar, like I was his agent, I ran his money, I was just in his life as a confidant, I would not recommend ever giving up large sums of money when you are doing that thing anyway. It's not like he's not working out. It's not like he's not spending time working on his body and his craft on his own. So why wouldn't you just go to the Ravens facility and get paid to do that? It doesn't make that much sense to me. But there is a big V in front of all these weeks beside one in the spring. And that's voluntary. You do not have to show up, though in your contract, there are workout incentives for you to show up. But when I'm an NFL team and I pay my quarterback the amount of money that these guys are making, we've seen Burrow, we've seen Mahomes, we've seen Josh Allen, we've seen Jalen Hurts, we've now seen Lamar, we've seen a lot of guys, Kyler Murray. There is an expectation that it's more, obviously I'm paying you to be a really good player, to help me win a division, to help me compete in the playoffs, to throw a lot of touchdowns, to be just a high-end guy. But I'm kind of paying you for a year-round operation. Because in OTAs, which in 2024, this isn't 1986. This isn't Buddy Ryan having you do tackling drills in shorts and a t-shirt. It's a country club operation because the rules mandate it so. Hell, John Harbaugh, within the last decade, got in trouble for being too physical in these practices. And the players turned them in. And they got popped. It's not allowed. You're basically working out with a strength coach, going to some meetings. It's like a 5-6 hour day, 3 days a week. And then you're going to games and hanging out, going to dinners with your teammates. If I'm the Ravens, I'm pretty pissed off. Like part of the reason we went back and forth forever, one, we had concerns, durability or whatever. You immediately answer that. You win the MVP. But you're my quarterback. You're my leader. You're the face of the franchise all year round. And if I'm in Lamar's camp, I'm like, Lamar, the only thing is, what's Patrick Mahomes doing? Patrick Mahomes go to the OTAs? Oh, he does? Then we should do that. Like, that's the guy you're chasing. Is Tiger Woods, if I'm chasing him in 2004, is he hitting balls? Is he practicing? Is he working on his game? Because if he is, I better be. Because I'm not as good as him. So I got to do whatever he's doing and then more. And part of it, when in the offseason, when you bring in a rookie class, when you add free agents, like you're the leader of the franchise. You're the guy everyone is looking at. And these practices are such a joke. Hell, you could take half the reps. You don't even need to do it all. But to not even go, I don't care about the money. Because like I said, relative to how much he makes, he won't notice it. Though, not a good habit to just be giving up that amount of money when your career in the history of this league is not that long. But to me, the bigger issue is like, what's going on here? Why would you not just be for 4 or 5 weeks in the offseason in the facility, on the field, with the team that you are the captain of, the best player on? It's part of the deal, part of what the money is for, the entire operation year round, right? that you are held to the highest standard at this spot. It's the most important position in sports. It's the highest paid position, obviously, in the league. And when your competition, like if Josh Allen, Joe Burrow, and Patrick Mahomes are on the field with their coaches during this period of time, and you're not, you're getting worse. Period, point blank, end of story. A couple of NFL stories. Larry Allen, who I think is widely considered one of, if not the best guard of all time, passed away at the young age of 52 years old. Uh, Most well known as just being a dominant Cowboy. Did finish his career with the 49ers. Ton of all pros, Hall of Famer, 11-time Pro Bowler, and just one of the more dominant physical specimens in the history of the trenches. There's a lot of videos going around the internet of the NFL used to have these like strength competitions where dudes would just like, it was like just strongman, and you would just throw on 225 and see how many times you could rep it. And I'm pretty sure he did 750 reps. There's a famous clip of Troy Aikman throwing an interception against the Saints, and Larry Allen ran down the linebacker. Just an all-time freak. So the NFL lost a legend today. Another guy that passed away within the last month, and I forgot to mention something, was Hall of Fame center Jim Otto, who played for the Raiders his entire career in the 60s and the 70s. Played when they were in the AFL, and then when they came to the NFL and John Madden was the coach. And I bring him up because when I was at Fresno State, Coach Hill during training camp, I think a lot of obviously programs do this. Every single night at training camp, for the most part, a different person would come speak. And sometimes it would be a businessman. Sometimes it would be like the chief of police, Jerry Dyer. And one year, I don't know if it was 08 or 09, Jim Otto came and just talked to the team. And at the end, there was kind of a Q&A. And at the time, this was 15 years ago. He could struggle to walk. He was in bad shape. Just the physical pounding that he took in the NFL. I can't imagine the concussion protocols existed back then, the pads. I mean, he could barely walk. But someone asked him, one of the dudes on the team was like, who's the toughest guy you ever played against? And I would imagine most, especially the older people in the room, expected him to say one of the legendary defensive linemen, maybe even like Mean Joe Green. And he said, honestly, the toughest guy that I ever encountered in the NFL was easily the person I saw every morning when I looked in the mirror. It was me, Jim Otto. And the whole room kind of went silent. And he was dead serious. It's like, what a badass. what a legend. I just want to tell that story, but RIP Jim Otto, obviously RIP to Larry Allen. And it's tough whenever, Otto was older, but lose the guy Larry Allen at 52 years old, that sucks. Brandon McManus was cut today by the Commanders, and I think it's a good example. Kickers and punters, their margin for error when they get in trouble is zero, whether they did it or they did not do it. Remember a couple years ago, Matt Ariza, I think I'm saying his name right, the punter who's now on the Chiefs, was accused of stuff at San Diego State. Well, a year later, it turned out it was all false. Chick made it up. He had nothing to do with it. The Bills cut him after like 2 days. They didn't even hesitate. And I think you consistently see when guys get in trouble at other positions. You see with the Chiefs, with Rashee Rice. It's like, yeah, we'll let the situation play out. And that's universal in the NFL. There's no morality in football. This is a business, and the bottom line is winning and losing. So you always just like, let this thing play out. Let's see if it goes away. Let's see how much trouble he gets into. Yeah, with kickers and punters, and there's a story about last year on a Jacksonville flight when they played in Europe, flying back, that he was super wasted, touching chicks. I don't know. I wasn't there. But neither the Commanders, and clearly they don't care. They ain't going to see this through. Yeah, we're out of this business. You're a kicker. It's not worth any blowback while this is taking place. And if you are guilty, we want no part of you. And if you are innocent, that's your issue, not ours. So if you are a kicker or punter, you better avoid any controversy at all costs, or you will get cut immediately. Ben Johnson last week, my guy Jeff Schwartz forwarded me the video where, a lot of these coordinators do press conferences during the offseason. And he was clearly asked about his head coaching aspirations and the situation last year. And he gave a pretty bizarre answer. One thing he said that you hear from like NBA players is like, I want to go somewhere where I can get a second contract. I want to go to the perfect situation. And I'm sitting there thinking, the reason most head coaches get fired is because it's a pretty bad, chaotic situation. The team you're with right now, the Lions, who are considered one of the better teams in the league, were about as chaotic as you got. And then 3 years later, the reason they're good is the head coach and the GM. Like, it's kind of on you to change the situation. That is why the job is available. Most jobs are not like 2019 or whatever, the Green Bay Packers. Hey, it's the Green Bay Packers. We got 35-year-old Aaron Rodgers. Anyone want it? It's usually Brian Daboll gets fired this year. Yeah, Danny Dimes and Tommy DeVito, and not many good players. You interested? That's typically the NFL. So I think he's got a warped sense of going. And listen, if you're a Lions fan, I'd actually be pretty excited. Maybe he's just cool with being a number two most of his life. And luckily, talk about timing, in 2024, top offensive coordinator and defensive coordinators make $3, $4, $5 million. So you get paid a ton of money. You don't have pressure of half the team. You don't have to deal with any of the problems. But you watch his speech for 2 minutes, he doesn't sound like most aspirational coordinators. Sean McVay and Kyle Shanahan are viewed as two of the better coaches in the league. Kyle Shanahan got to the 49ers, they were 2-10. They were a joke. Their roster was awful. Sean McVay, when he got the Rams job, and listen, I'm probably guilty of this too. You watch Jared Goff his rookie year, you're like, I don't know if this is going to work. They might have a problem. This is awful. And then 3-4 years later, you're like, yeah, not awful anymore. Why? Because coaches change it. Is Alabama a great job or is Nick Saban great? Obviously, it's a really good job, but not everyone's doing what he's doing. The coach makes these operations in college and pro in football because of the impact they have on everything. So, like, yeah, the Giants, if they fire Brian Daboll, they've run through a bunch of coaches. Still, the New York Giants, like, it's a pretty good opportunity. A lot of aspirational people in the NFL would be lined up to try to get that gig. Ben Johnson's like, it's a little weird. I don't know if I can get a second contract. I've just never heard a coach talk like that. And listen, I respect it. If he just wants to be a number two offensive coordinator the rest of his life, that type of thing, though, GMs and these owners see, they got a red flag on because there's already a red flag on him. Last year, his second year of being in the cycle, he called Adam Peters and Josh Harris as they were flying to talk to him for the second time. It's like, yeah, I'm out. Like, what? Couldn't have just told us after we talked to you and faked it? So I don't know. Something's a little off with this guy. Great. Nothing to do with his coaching. Offensive coordinator, he's awesome. But part of the way we talk about these up-and-coming coordinators, like, is he the next Mike Shanahan? Is he the next whoever, right? Once upon a time, all these guys, Bill Belichick, Andy Reid. Andy wasn't a coordinator, but the majority of guys around the league fall into that position, offensive or defensive coordinator. I want a piece of this guy. I don't know if that's the first reaction when other owners, which again is incredible if you're a Lions fan, because you will keep Ben Johnson forever as long as he's willing to stay. But maybe there aren't going to be that many teams interested after hearing him continue to talk. Okay, last but not least, Tangent Tuesday. I was at the gym on Saturday morning trying to get less fat. And like most gyms in the cardio area, we have probably 3 or 4 TVs. I guess we got probably 6 TVs, 3 TVs on one side, 3 TVs on the other side, like lined up for the ellipticals and the treadmills. And they, most of the time, have games on, right? Basketball games, baseball games, football games, whatever. And I looked up at the TV when I got there. And it was 10 or 11 in the morning. You know, I'm not trying to be a hero on Saturday. And it's Caitlin Clarke. She's playing. Then I get on the treadmill. I looked at the guy next to me. He's probably mid-50s, pretty good shape. He had the game on as well. So I'm like, shit, I'll get a little sweat on, watch Caitlin Clarke play. That never in a million years would have happened a year ago, let alone 5 years ago. So the amount of popularity and interest she has brought from sports fans, I'm a good example, just like many of you are. Been a sports fan now as long as I've been able to talk and watch television. for 30 plus years. Never consumed any WNBA content. And I've watched everything: soccer, tennis, random sports, NASCAR, F1, obviously the big sports. No WNBA content. Now I pay attention. I'm paying attention to Caitlin Clarke. She has brought me as a consumer. Well, there are clearly players in the WNBA who are envious and don't like her and are like taking her out, which is par for the course. That's what happens in sports. Michael Jordan showed up, people tried to take him out. Tiger Woods showed up at first, a bunch of guys were talking shit. Bryce Harper showed up, everyone was throwing at his head. When you get a bunch of hype, people push back right away. Your competitors, not us, the consumer, but the competitors. Because consumer, I just want to watch, but competitors, and they're going after, which I understand. If you put me in their shoes, if I'm just some chick on some random team, I might try to take her out too. But what cannot be argued is, they say a rising tide lifts all boats. The interest she has brought to the sport is quantifiable. It's undeniable. There is some pressure on her, because I use Tiger Woods and Bryce Harper as examples. Well, Tiger got there and immediately started working everybody. Bryce Harper, really early, you realize, like, this guy's a star. So after a while, like, what are you going to do? Michael Jordan, like, Isaiah Joe, you want any more of this smoke? Because I plan on destroying you. There is pressure on her. Like, this is cool, but I'm not paying attention in 3 or 4 years if she's just average. Now, I can't speak to the roster construction. I saw Draymond tweeting that they need like a goon, like they need a Draymond. So I don't know. Do those exist in the WNBA? Clearly, their team's not very good. They have the number 1 overall pick. But it is incumbent, if this is going to be a sustainable thing, because she's going to have it this year. But if she starts rattling off MVPs and becomes one of the better players in the history of the sport, it will not slow down. And obviously, there's pressure on the team to build a good squad around her. And I can't pretend to know if she's some future all-time great or not. Because I remember I was watching the draft because I wanted to see her get drafted. And they showed like a montage of Reggie Miller's sister, Cheryl. And she was before my time. My dad used to always say, he's like, she's the best women's basketball player of all time, not even close. I watched that highlights. There can't ever be a better women's basketball player than Cheryl Miller. If you put Cheryl Miller right now in the WNBA in her prime, she would eviscerate everybody. So if Caitlin can become a version of that, which I don't know. I hope so, but I don't think it's guaranteed. This will end. I'm not saying next year, but it's to sustain the hype. Like Tiger started winning the Masters. Bryce Harper started hitting balls 450 feet off every pitcher. It has to come. Like LeBron James by year 2 or 3 was like, he's one of the best players in the league. And it's going to be fascinating to watch. But these girls aren't going to stop going after her. But like, I hope everyone realizes she is your potential to financial windfall. Most of us in business, when someone brings positivity and money behind them, like, you embrace them with open arms. Like, come on in. You need my chair? You thirsty? What do you need? It's different in sports because you're competing. But it does feel like there's a little, people lose sight of this. And the pushback on Tiger is a good example. And I'm not pretending she's going to be remotely close to Tiger. But after a couple of years, everyone realized, like, this guy's bringing a lot more eyeballs, a lot more money for us all. Let's embrace this dude. Try to beat him, but hey, come on, Tiger. You want my tea time? And it's going to be fascinating to watch, because a lot of think pieces out there, a lot of people thinking like it's exhausting. But I do think for this to keep going, she's got to start kicking everyone's butt. And they got a ways to go. Because I've watched a lot of basketball games. The end of that game was tough. They could barely get the ball past half court. But she's a fascinating story. There's no disputing that. But we've seen a lot of those over the years. Tim Tebow was a fascinating story until he couldn't hit a slant route. And you're like, this guy stinks. I'm not saying she's that either, but we got a ways to go.